GB News. For many, it's fine out there this evening, but we are going to see some wet weather working its way in, bringing a wet start for many tomorrow. A more humid feel tomorrow. It's been quite fresh today with a brisk westerly wind. And these weather fronts are now approaching, bringing cloud and rain across Northern Ireland through the evening. Nothing too heavy at this stage, but could see some heavy pulses developing later in the night across Northern Ireland and then across parts of northwest England and North Wales, along with much of southern Scotland. It turns soggy through the early hours. Further east and further south, most areas staying dry. Reasonably warm night. Temperatures mostly holding up in the teens. On to Tuesday, and as I said, a bit of a wet start for some, particularly northwest England, North Wales, southwest Scotland. Some of that rain at times getting to the east of the Pennines. Much of East Anglia in the southeast starting dry. May well start off with a bit of sunshine here, but quite grey for South Wales, southwest England. There's that zone of wet weather over Northern Ireland, northwest England and southern Scotland. Some breaks in the cloud a little further north, but again here we'll see further showers coming in at times across the far northwest. So as I said, it is a bit of a messy picture. The rain across northern England's likely to last on and off through much of the morning. Same goes for North Wales. Some of it getting to the east of the Pennines, but a decent chance that areas here will stay dry. Not much rain at all getting to East Anglia, the Midlands, and here actually better chance of seeing some breaks in the cloud come the afternoon. That will lift the temperatures quite warm if the sun pops out, 25, maybe 26 or a degree or so higher. And quite a humid feel for England and Wales. Again, a bit fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Wednesday's a largely dry day. Maybe this cloudier zone over the Midlands and South Wales generating a little bit of rain. And late in the day, we could see some thunderstorms drifting up from France across eastern England. So that is something we need to watch as the heat and humidity start to build again, with temperatures perhaps here on Wednesday getting into the high 20s. Bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£54,321 in totally tax-free cash could make your year the best yet. How would you react if you got that winning call?
Oh my God, I'm going to cry. Oh my God. Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. As the war in the Middle East intensifies, the British government looks more irrelevant than ever, as the cabinet appears to have no idea what it believes. I'll be joined by the American journalist Hadley Gamble to get the latest, as just hours ago, Iran has struck back, targeting US bases in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Reform's Nigel Farage, you may have heard of him, commits to a radical new policy which would shield non-doms from taxation if they pay a one-off landing fee. I'll be scrutinising every detail to see if this really could bring high net worth individuals back to Blighty. Britain's asylum backlog continues to grow as 50,000 migrants are still waiting for their appeals to be heard after having their initial claims rejected. As hundreds of migrants continue to arrive daily, is the system truly at breaking point? And in another admission of net zero lunacy, the government is now cutting environmental taxes on energy-intensive manufacturers as part of its new industrial strategy. The merry-go-round of net zero continues, but State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Sir John Redwood, and the former Labour MP, the programme's favourite socialist, Stephen Pound. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Katie Bowen.
Jacob, thank you and good evening. The top stories at 8:01. And breaking news tonight that Iran has launched a missile operation against a US military base in Qatar. US officials via Reuters are saying that no missiles appear to have hit the Al Udeid base, as Qatari officials confirmed that they successfully intercepted all missiles. No casualties have been reported. Earlier, it was reported that air defence systems were also activated at the American Ain al-Assad base in Iraq, although US officials have now confirmed that there was no Iranian attack detected at any other US military base other than Qatar. It's understood that President Trump is currently in the Situation Room, with the White House saying they're closely monitoring potential threats. Reports are saying tonight that the Trump administration was aware in advance of Iran's attack on the Al Udeid base. Meanwhile, Iran reportedly coordinated those attacks on those bases with Qatari officials and gave advance notice that attacks were coming to minimise casualties. Defence Minister Luke Pollard, speaking in the House of Commons a short time ago, said that the UK government utterly condemns any escalation. These latest developments come after the UK earlier issued a warning recommending UK citizens in Qatar to shelter in place until further notice. Qatar also announced that it is temporarily shutting its airspace. The RAF has evacuated 63 British nationals from Israel to Cyprus, with more flights to come, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy told the House of Commons this afternoon. We'll bring you more on this developing story shortly. Elsewhere today, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says she's decided to prescribe Palestine action and will lay an order before Parliament next week, which, if passed, will make membership and support for the protest group illegal. That's as the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, expressed his shock and frustration at a protest held today in support of Palestine action. Protesters clashed with police and at least 2 people have been arrested at the protest as we know it. On Friday, Palestine Action activists broke into RAF Brize Norton in Oxfordshire and sprayed 2 military planes with red paint in protest of the UK's support of Israel over the war in Gaza, which the Chancellor called totally unacceptable. Plans to lower energy costs for thousands of businesses by exempting them from some green energy levies have been set out as part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan may slash energy bills by up to 25% for more than 7,000 UK businesses. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called the industrial strategy a turning point for Britain's economy by supporting key industries where there is a potential for growth. Acting Shadow Energy Secretary Andrew Bowie criticised the plans, saying that the UK needed a serious approach to energy policy. And the UK and Ukraine will work together more closely on industrial military production, Sir Keir Starmer said after a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in Downing Street today. The Ukrainian president also met with the King at Windsor Castle. Mr Zelensky travelled to the UK to discuss his country's defences ahead of a NATO summit that starts tomorrow. He thanked British troops for supporting his country. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. As you've been hearing this evening, the situation in the Middle East has further escalated as Iran has attacked US military bases. It is believed that the Trump administration were aware in advance of these attacks. Let me take you back to the early hours of Sunday morning when, after days of deliberation, the United States President Donald Trump confirmed that he had ordered the bombing of 3 nuclear sites in Iran. The strikes were in full coordination with Israel and followed a tense 72 hours in which senior White House advisers had become increasingly convinced that diplomatic channels had been exhausted. They believed military action was the only way to eliminate the threat of Iran's nuclear program.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
The UK's inert Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, was quick to stress that the UK was not involved in any capacity.
It was not the UK's action. We were not involved. We were clear when this began and Israel's attacks began that we were not involved, and we were clear again yesterday morning that we were not involved in those actions overnight.
And the invitation of a wet wipe, the Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard refused to say whether His Majesty's government were for or against US action.
Is the United Kingdom opposed to the action we saw on the weekend? It's a yes or no.
Well, that's not one for me to comment on.
For or against?
Well, the American activity has now happened. They're taking those steps to deal with the threat. And what we have, as a country, what we have been focused on over the past few weeks...
You don't know whether we're supportive, whether we support or oppose it?
Well, it hardly makes you proud to be British. The very fact that Trump went ahead with the strikes is embarrassing for the Prime Minister, as he said on Tuesday that he had no doubt that the US would not intervene. Sir Keir Starmer said his focus is on de-escalation, as he refused to say if the UK would support the US if it is attacked.
The US has now taken action to alleviate that threat. It is important that we now de-escalate the situation, stabilise the region, and get the parties back around the table.
Well, he's so boring I almost talked over him. Anyway, His Majesty's government looks feeble and frail. The Prime Minister's statement has welcomed the destruction of Iran's nuclear programme, but is notably silent on its legality, a silence no doubt attributable to his pedantic Attorney-General, Lord Hermer. It is understood that Hermer advised against supporting military action against Iran, warning that it may be illegal. However, the UK may use force to aid another state which is acting in self-defence, and the much better shadow Attorney-General, Lord Wolfson, has put out a series of tweets showing that it is clearly lawful, and Hermer is just anti-doing anything. He is the epitome of the blobbish nature of current government that is ruled by lawyers and never does anything that is any use to keep the country safe. He should not be in office. He doesn't deserve his high office, and no one should care about the niceties of international law, as that would not stop a nuclear bomb dispatched by Iran falling on our heads, which is rather more important than what the legal eagles think. It's also important to remember that Iran has repeatedly threatened to attack British bases and personnel if the UK assists Israel. Iran's attack on US bases in the Middle East earlier this evening further proves the need for Britain to have a unified stance with our threatened allies. The Prime Minister and his cabinet have adopted the peacock approach, showing their fine feathers but doing absolutely nothing other than issuing fatuous messages about de-escalation. Every Christian engagement in the Middle East since the siege of Jerusalem in 1187 has failed, but it is impossible to ignore the fundamental threat that Iran poses to our national security. It is clear that diplomatic solutions have failed, and if the West does not intervene now, Iran will join North Korea in a different league, becoming unanswerable to any other power. Striking Iran's nuclear bases was the right thing to do, and we in the West must hope that it works. We should sing paeans of praise to Donald Trump and Israel for trying to make the world a safer place. As ever, let me know your views via mailmog@gbnews.com. Well, I'm joined now by the international journalist Hadley Gamble. Hadley, thank you very much for coming in. It seems to me this is a very important step by America and by Israel, that stopping Iran having a nuclear bomb is in the global interest?
They are the largest state sponsors of terrorists in the world. Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, all of these groups have benefited from Iran's actions over the last several years, particularly in the Middle East, in the Gulf Arab countries as well. We saw those attacks on Saudi's oil infrastructure just a few years ago, knocking global oil production off for a significant amount of time. What I'm seeing in this response from the Iranians is shaping up to be a bit of a tempest in a teapot. This was an attack that supposedly was coordinated with the Qataris, with the United States, and it seems as if it's following in the same vein that we saw during the first Trump administration with the death of Qasem Soleimani, a very muted response for Iran. But as you say, when you have a country like Iran that poses a real threat, not just to Israel, but also to the United States and other countries as well, Western democracies, going full-blown toward a nuclear weapon, the International Atomic Energy Agency has said this multiple times. They're cheating. They're not coming to the table with the full deck of cards, if you will, and they're getting closer to a nuclear weapon. What other choice did the United States have? And as you've been saying, it's a bit surprising that our allies, our closest allies in this special relationship, have done nothing.
And diplomacy clearly hasn't worked. The previous agreement with Iran that Trump scrapped when he first became president just allowed Iran to get the money to fund its terrorism operations and indeed to fund its bomb-making operations.
Correct. And what's going to be very interesting, I mean, not only did the JCPOA do nothing, scrapping it with maximum pressure also was reversed with 4 years of Joe Biden and his folks in the White House talking again and again about a new JCPOA. But let's look at the facts. The Trump administration did try to get a deal with Iran. They worked very hard to get one, and the Iranians pushed that olive branch away. So what was the response that the United States was going to make there? I mean, they have said again and again that they're going to, secure Israel, and that's not something that's certainly going to change under this administration. So again, what choice did they have? What I have noticed over the last 24 to 48 hours in the response, the president's got a heck of a lot more hell, if you will, from his own people than Western observers, Western nations. I mean, even in this country, Sir Keir Starmer, in the end, couldn't really criticize it. But as you were saying, it's fascinating to watch UK politics this time around with this particular government. And, the joke about David Lammy is that he's a great foreign affairs secretary because he cares about the, affairs of the foreigners, not his own people.
Yeah, well, and he's not a serious figure on the international stage. But let's come back to Iran's response, because I think that is very interesting, that it told America and Qatar, as I've read, that it was about to send some missiles. They then seem to have been shot down. As you say, this is a very muted response, but should we be worried about other ways in which Iran will respond?
I would say you always have to be worried when we're talking about a regime like this one. Again, the biggest state sponsors of terror in the world. At the same point, what's happening in the Gulf Arab countries right now didn't even push oil above $80 a barrel, which says to me that these are countries that are very much prepared, and the markets as well are watching this, with more rose-colored glasses than perhaps the news media would want them to be. Because all I've heard for the last 3 days is, oh, this is World War III, Donald Trump has done this to us, from the Western press generally. And of course, that seems as if it has been completely averted.
And the Straits of Hormuz do not seem to be closed, not least because China receives so much of its oil, and China is, of course, the close ally of Iran. And Iran is increasingly dependent on its allies because it has no economy and it now possibly has no nuclear arms program.
And let's be very, very clear. With the Fifth Fleet based in the Gulf, you have to remember that we, the United States, are securing Asian oil supplies. That's what we're doing.
Yes.
We have our own oil. We don't need that oil, right? That's all going to China. And the Chinese know that. So, of course, they're going to be working in conjunction with us.
And it's going to Japan and Korea. So your allies, so it's not just your enemy, maybe a strong word for China, but it's not just your competitors that it's going to. It's going to some friendly nations as well. So what do you think happens next? Do we yet know through any briefings whether this has been successful? Because there are the stories about the enriched uranium being moved out in the last couple of days. Is that a concern, or has this destroyed the capacity to turn enriched uranium into a bomb?
At the end of the day, that is the big question. And the conversations being had at this point are whether or not those weapons were actually effective, right? And we're going to have to wait and see whether the Iranians are going to suddenly, in a few days from now, release photos, for example, saying that this hasn't been effective, or they'll say, we moved our uranium out, et cetera. The question is, does it benefit them to let this story have more legs? Because at the end of the day, the United States and the Israelis have made it quite clear that they do not want this country to get a nuclear bomb. The Gulf Arab countries cannot allow that to happen because, again, they have said we're going to get into an arms race.
Saudi Arabia would have to have a bomb if Iran had a bomb.
Correct, and they have said this on multiple occasions.
And If it hasn't worked, is the world safer or more dangerous?
It is an excellent question, one, sadly, that I don't have the answer to, because this is a country, unfortunately, run by a lot of religious mullahs, and we just don't know or have a vision of how long this can go on beyond the death, for example, of the Ayatollah. A lot of conversations over the last several days about the possibility of regime change, but the reality is that until the Iranian people are able to do that for themselves, perhaps through various forceful measures, we're not going to have a clear idea of what these folks can do.
At regime change have been very unsuccessful.
American attempts in particular have not shown themselves to be very effective in the Middle East.
You're kind of the British ones, actually.
Well, this, again, as a president who has said, I'm not going to put boots on the ground, I'm not into foreign wars. So this was a decisive action. Now, the consequences, as you know, of decisive action can be varied.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, now, let me turn to Lord Mann, John Mann. Because, John, you've been thinking very carefully about the effects this may have in the UK in relation to terrorist activity in the UK and what the government should be doing about that.
And it's essential that we don't turn our attention away from the fact that Iran has had people, different agencies, operating in multiple ways across the world, and not just theoretically. For example, just a few weeks ago, in Baku, the chief rabbi of Baku was attempted to be murdered by Georgian criminals who were being paid by Iran. Something similar happened in the UAE. And so in countries that
people were stabbed in this country as well.
There are whole series of people who have been arrested in this country. And of course, so that's been kept, perhaps rightly so, very discreet till it gets to court. So the Iranians have multiple ways and have had a long history of sinking deep. And so ensuring that we're protecting ourselves is a top priority. Because even though it would be, in the bigger picture, collateral damage, we want zero collateral damage impacting anyone here.
And what are you therefore encouraging the British government to do to make us safer?
Well, the government has, as it always does, tightly look at the precise situation for individuals, for institutions, how things are being done. And in the short term, we're good at that. We have been good at that. We were under the last government as well, in my dealings with them. Where I think we need to be stronger, which is also a criticism from your time in office, is in terms of what I'd call the non-terror extremism that Iran likes to foment. Because, of course, terrorists come from somewhere. They may not be terrorists now, but where does the indoctrination, the politicisation of them come from? And I think we need to be a lot stronger on dealing with those extremists. But that's not something we can just turn a tap on and change. That's something that takes several years of hard work. I'm more confident that we're going to get on top of that in this country, but there's a long way to go. But in terms of our ability to listen in and watch, we've been very good at that, but we need to remain good at that, both here and for any British nationals abroad. And of course, we've got troops in the Gulf states. And Iran has managed to not just attack Qatar, but from what we're hearing, potentially Kuwait and Bahrain and others simultaneously. That does smack of desperation from them.
But it's very interesting that they announced the attacks, because with the sophisticated air defence systems that people have, if you know an attack is coming, you've got all your systems up and ready, you shoot them all down.
Very interesting. But I mean, we're not sure. Well, you and I can't be. I suspect some people are more sure of us and won't be telling us. But, where are the centrifuges? Where's the uranium? I mean, these are things that can be squirreled away. So the immediate threat would certainly appear to have been got rid of. But that lasts for a few years. That's not permanent. And I'm more optimistic on regime change than I've ever been. I mean, I've been out in Iran once, met some of the activists who oppose the government. There's a long tradition of that. This is not a people who support the Ayatollahs. It's a people that hasn't had a proper democracy, where elections have been rigged, where there's a lot of more than pressure, but terror used hold people in, and the ferment of regime change will, I think, now take hold in Iran.
Does it worry you that if the West appears to want to change the status of Iran, that gives some credibility to Putin trying to change the regime in Ukraine? And do you think your Labour friends will be worrying about that, particularly the left of the Labour Party, who may be less of your friends?
Oh, well, they're a small number these days, thankfully, and I think it's good news and a good sign that Zelensky was in Downing Street today, because one of the things Starmer has done is repeat the Boris Johnson approach of backing Ukraine when others have been less prepared to do so. I think in terms of world stability, that's crucially important. But we need to play our cards smartly. Trump is playing his cards at the moment, in my judgment, very smartly. But listening to him, I mean, he's already offering the opportunity for negotiations with Iran. No boots on the ground is a different kind of situation. That's clearly the Trump strategy. And he's also got this fascinating situation. The only people opposing this, the only people protesting, are a few weird and wonderful people, a handful in and around London, and some of his own backyard.
Yeah, and
Marjorie and others who don't seem to like doing anything. I mean, Aaron Corbyn are the only ones opposing it in the world.
I walked to and from lunch past the protest. There didn't seem many people.
No, I mean, it's not.
Anyway, it's wonderful. I think this is real news that a Labour peer backs Trump. I think that is a GB News first. So thank you very much, John. Reform leader Nigel Farage unveiled a radical tax policy this morning, which would see non-doms given the chance to pay £250,000 tax. So that's what we're coming to shortly.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
She left office 35 years ago, which seems incredible.
God, that makes me feel really old. I remember being at school when she was deposed.
Oh, that makes me feel really old, because I was way beyond school.
Well, I was 47 yesterday, so...
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you. Carry on.
So there are three generations that have grown up that weren't alive when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. And there are so many myths that have built up about her that... and part of the reason I wrote it was because my personal trainer, I broke my hip 2 years ago.
Yes.
So I had to get a personal trainer to the rehab. And he's 25, or was then. And when he found out what I did for a living, he said, well, Margaret Thatcher, I've heard of her, but who was she? What did she do? He didn't even know she'd been Prime Minister. And I was like slightly horrified by this. So this is really aimed at those generations. You can't tell every aspect of her life in a book that size, but it really is an introduction to her. And the first sentence says, if you've read Charles Moore's 3-volume biography of her, please stop here. This book is not for you.
No.
So it covers most of the important things.
And by the way, maybe that revelation by your PT does ask questions about the national curriculum and history teaching. They should do a section, shouldn't they, on our first female Prime Minister, arguably. But what's the challenge then when you're writing somebody's life up? I mean, and what a life she led.
Well, I found out that it's much more difficult to write a short book than a long book, because you really do have to be concise. I was told I had 30,000 words. I said, well, that's a pamphlet, not a book. So I stretched it to 45,000. But normally a biography would be 120, 150,000 words. So it really was quite a challenge to condense it all. And what do you leave out? I mean, I wasn't going to do a chapter on Northern Ireland, but as I was writing it, I thought, no, you can't do that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, the GB News presenter and Reform leader Nigel Farage unveiled a radical tax policy this morning, which would see non-doms given the chance to pay a £250,000 fee to shield them from tax, with the proceeds going to the lowest paid. Under those policies, the proposals, they would pay a landing fee, which would not be taxed then on any wealth, income or capital gains earned overseas, and they'd be exempt from inheritance tax. What's so interesting is that reformers then said that 100% of the revenue raised would go directly to the bank accounts of the lowest earning 10% of full-time workers. Will this entice high net worth individuals back? Will it entice low earners to vote for reform? Well, I'm joined now by Reform Councillor Maxwell Harrison, as well as my most intellectual panel, the former Conservative Cabinet Ministers John Redwood and the former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Well, Maxwell, thank you for coming in. Can you explain the details of this policy?
No, of course. I mean, looking at the state of our country today, it's very clear we have a drain of entrepreneurs who are fleeing this country because of the measures that are being imposed, not only under Labour, but from the Conservative governments as well. So we are putting forward a landing fee of £250,000 for those non-doms to come back to the United Kingdom with tax benefits in an effort to actually try and rejuvenate and restore our country again.
What do they get for the $250,000?
Well, it's a case of they will have no income tax on all their foreign earnings, and on their UK assets, no inheritance tax either.
For how long?
For a period of 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
And no death duties if they die whilst they're here?
From my understanding, yes.
Can they renew it after 10 years, or is it 10 years and that's it?
Yes, yes, they can, yes.
So it's £25,000 a year?
Yeah, exactly, £25,000 for 10 years.
OK, and then it goes to low earners. How do you define low earners?
Well, those in the lowest 10% of earners in the United Kingdom, which is around 2.5 million, which is from my understanding.
OK, and are these people who are in full-time work?
Yes.
Only full-time work?
Correct.
And if you go above that level, do you lose it all in one lump, or do you lose it in a tapered fashion?
I think my understanding is you lose it in one lump. It is specifically for those 10,000, or 10%, my apologies, of those 2.5 million whom are the lowest earners in the United Kingdom.
So how much do you think each person would get?
£600 if we have 6,000 Britannia cards issued in a period of a year.
OK, and what numbers do you think are realistic?
I think that the figure that we've put forward today of £1.5 billion is quite realistic. It's not an astronomical number, but if you say, for example, we issue 10,000 Britannia cards, that means for those 2.5 million people, potentially, that 10%, they could potentially get £1,000, which I think you'd agree with me, Jacob, right now is what people desperately need.
And well, people always need cash. Yeah. But what happens if a new government comes in? If Reform were in for 5 years, new government comes in, how do you guarantee the non-doms that they get it for 10 years?
Well, we would hope that any government that is, let's say, that follows our Reform government, following our win in 2029, we'd hope they want entrepreneurs to stay in the United Kingdom. It seems quite sensible and feasible.
You would say Rachel Reeves came back.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, I know. This is your nightmare.
I know, it's my nightmare.
The return of the living incompetent comes back and says, I hate non-doms, I'm scrapping all this. Are you confident that the British government would follow the normal process of not having retrospective taxation?
Jacob, as you know, no, it wouldn't be binded by Parliament, but we'd hope so. You know, what we see in the moment in time is that actually entrepreneurs are fleeing. We reckon 10,800 sort of wealthy people have left in the last year, and that has left a massive, massive hole in our public finances. So we'd hope that if we weren't successful in a second term of government, that new government would ensure that putting the British people first, trying to put extra pennies and pounds in people's pockets, that they would do the right thing.
But when people say this is really unfair because there are lots of poor people who are disabled and can't work, are carers, why aren't they getting the money?
Well, I think what's really unfair at the moment, Jacob, is actually you look at our system now, it's very unfair in terms of taxes. You know, we've had a tax hike of 40 billion from the last budget, and we look at what's going to happen come the end of this year, potentially taxes going up for another 20 billion needed because of Labour's mismanagement. So I think what's really fair is if we can support people and we can give them an additional £600 to those who wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, like those who live in Sheppey and the island I represent, then that's the right thing to do.
Well, Stephen, I don't know where you stand on fox hunting, but your fox has been shot, hasn't it? The Labour Party's fox just been annihilated.
Well, I have to say, sometimes I'm almost speechless with admiration for the sheer brass neck of Nigel Farage outflanking the good old Labour Party on the left. Well, it's extraordinary. I mean, you know, we're aiming our guns in one direction. He's run round the back and attacked us. But look, it doesn't actually stack up. First of all, I mean, Maxwell, I have to say, you made a very, very persuasive case, but not quite persuasive enough. There's no evidence whatsoever of a deleterious economic impact from people leaving the country at the present time. And the get-out-of-jail-free £250,000 miraculous Britannia card is in no way equates to the amount of money which we would actually save by taxing those people. And more importantly, there's an enormous number of people who we want in this country, IT entrepreneurs, AI entrepreneurs, doctors, people who do not have £250,000. So the idea that we should be welcoming certain people into this country rather than saying anybody, doesn't matter what, they could be some flipping Russian oligarch, you know, up to his neck in corruption and greed, and he got 250,000 quid, in you come, son. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't add up.
John, there may be some issues with the practicalities and who precisely it applies to and what you do with the people who are doctors who come in for 5 years or something. But it's quite an interesting policy proposal, isn't it?
Well, it's good to challenge the government because they finally killed off the non-doms completely. The previous government wasn't that helpful. But this government decided they didn't want them at all, and they sent a dreadful message to the world. And Stephen is far too cavalier about this. There is a big hole in the accounts, which is going to get worse, because we depend very much on taxing very rich people and people on very high incomes, and they've been leaving in their droves. My worry about this is it doesn't go far enough, quickly enough, to reverse the damage that has been done finally by Rachel Reeves. So I can't really see why non-dom would suddenly say, oh, that's great, here's £250,000 and trust the British government for the reason you set up.
But it's quite clever to link the payment to people who are earning but not earning vast amounts, to disintermediate the government, just take the money from one lot and allow it to go through to another.
Yeah, but it's a rhetorical trick. And of course, what they're hoping is there will be some other income tax that they manage to levy because these people then do start to generate an income in Britain. But when they first come in, all their income is somewhere else, and you won't be getting anything from that. The reason we need these people back is we were spending their tax on the services we're currently providing. And that's why Rachel has got a bigger black hole and a lot of borrowing.
And, Stephen, on enormous economic activity, because all these people, regardless of whether they were paying tax, they employed people, they lived in houses, they drove cars, they shopped.
This is anecdotal. I mean, there's no actual hard...
It's true.
There's no economic evidence.
Well,
go and look at it.
Let's just take up on a slightly higher...
Stephen, I just don't think that's right. I think we do now know that there's a £400 million hit to the Treasury from the loss of non-doms. We know how many millionaires have been leaving. The figures are being calculated by economists pretty much as we speak.
They are in the process. But look, here's the genius of Nigel Farage. It's a very good thing in politics to work out what your enemy would do that you would dislike the most. And for Nigel Farage to rebrand himself as Robin Hood is a stroke of absolute genius. And it gives me no pleasure whatsoever to say that. I don't think the sums add up. I really don't. And I don't think there's a direct read across with X number of people moving out and Y amount of money coming in. However, the fact that people in the street will actually be thinking about this. Robin Hood, good old Nigel, that is the real threat. It's not the detail. The devil, as we all know, is in the detail. But the broad picture he's painting is one of flipping genius.
But, John, what we should actually do is restore the non-dom position to the one that it was under Gordon Brown, not exactly a right-wing chancellor.
Exactly, I quite agree. And it's got progressively worse over the last 15 years, and we're getting a bitter harvest as a result. And, you know, these people, they bring talent, they bring innovation, they hire people, they create companies. That's exactly what we need here.
But they're not the only people.
They've been turned away.
They're not the only people.
Well, they're not the only people, but your party is trying to make sure they will soon be.
Well, just wait. Tomorrow at 7 o'clock on GB News, Robin Hood will be here himself in Lincoln Green and wearing the finest tights. That is Nigel Farage himself. But thank you, Maxwell, and to my panel. In a moment, 50,000 asylum seekers are waiting for their appeals to be heard after having initial claims rejected. Is Britain's asylum system completely broken?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
If you or someone you know is heading further afield over the next few days, you can expect widespread sunshine across the Mediterranean, and it's going to be breezy for Greece. The usual seasonal wind blowing through the Greek islands as a result of heat building over Turkey. The heat builds over Italy and the Balearics during the next few days. We're going to see unusually high temperatures during Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it's mostly fine across Iberia and into the Canary Islands, but you can see the temperature rise in Italy there up to the mid to high 30s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. For many, it's fine out there this evening, but we are going to see some wet weather working its way in, bringing a wet start for many tomorrow. A more humid feel tomorrow. It's been quite fresh today with a brisk westerly wind. And these weather fronts are now approaching, bringing cloud and rain across Northern Ireland through the evening. Nothing too heavy at this stage, but could see some heavy pulses developing later in the night across Northern Ireland and then across parts of northwest England and North Wales, along with much of southern Scotland. It turns soggy through the early hours. Further east and further south, most areas staying dry. Reasonably warm night. Temperatures mostly holding up in the teens. On to Tuesday, and as I said, a bit of a wet start for some, particularly northwest England, North Wales, southwest Scotland. Some of that rain at times getting to the east of the Pennines. Much of East Anglia in the southeast starting dry. May well start off with a bit of sunshine here, but quite grey for South Wales, southwest England. There's that zone of wet weather over Northern Ireland, northwest England and southern Scotland. Some breaks in the cloud a little further north, but again here we'll see further showers coming in at times across the far northwest. So as I said, it is a bit of a messy picture. The rain across northern England's likely to last on and off through much of the morning. Same goes for North Wales. Some of it getting to the east of the Pennines, but a decent chance that areas here will stay dry. Not much rain at all getting to East Anglia, the Midlands, and here actually better chance of seeing some breaks in the cloud come the afternoon. That will lift the temperatures. Quite warm if the sun pops out, 25, maybe 26 or a degree or so higher. And quite a humid feel for England and Wales. Again, a bit fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Wednesday's a largely dry day. Maybe this cloudier zone over the Midlands and South Wales generating a little bit of rain. And late in the day, we could see some thunderstorms drifting up from France across eastern England. So that is something we need to watch as the heat and humidity start to build again, with temperatures perhaps here on Wednesday getting into the high 20s. Bye for now.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
For the third time in a week, I found myself forced to remind you of when Labour repeated this mantra.
Serious answer is to smash the gangs. We have to take those gangs down, to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, to smash these gangs.
Process the backlog, we were told, and that this would be the mighty solution along with smash the gangs to the migrant crisis. But lo and behold, it came to pass that more than 50,000 migrants are waiting for their appeals to be heard after having initial claims rejected. And where do they stay in the meantime? Yes, you guessed it, in the hotels that Labour promised to close. Well, my most intellectual panel is still with me, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister John Redwood and the former Labour MP Stephen Pound. John, this was bound to happen, wasn't it? That they said we'll clear the backlog. They then find that lots of people who are here are meant to go home. They then appeal. So they've still got exactly the same people living in exactly the same hotels, and nothing has changed.
Well, it's getting worse because they took the deterrent away, so the flows actually increased of the illegal migrants arriving in the small boats. And as you rightly say, it might take a year to find out whether your initial claim is successful or not. And then those who are turned down, they may have another year waiting for an appeal. And so we've got 2 years of hotel costs, which is through the roof, and this Labour government doesn't know how to pay for it all.
And then even if at the end of 2 years they lose, they still don't get deported, because we never seem to deport many people at all.
No, and then they're looking for other types of accommodation. So we've now got the worst of all possible worlds. We've still got far too many in very expensive hotels. And then we've got enormous pressure on pressurised areas of the housing market like London, where they want to find other accommodation. So they're bidding all the prices up for the rents, making it very difficult for people who are permanently settled here.
Stephen, wasn't Smash the Gangs one of the most dishonest things that the Prime Minister was saying when he was in opposition? Because the idea that the Conservative Party, the Conservative government, didn't want to enforce law and order was ridiculous. There was...
I don't think it was dishonest. I think it was ambitious, and perhaps it was over-ambitious. But look, the key thing, one thing that absolutely boils my blood, and John and I have both been MPs for a pretty long time, people used to come to my surgery with a obviously fraudulent case. People that suddenly become gay or suddenly become a Christian, whatever. And because their cases wasn't heard for 5 years, within 5 years, guess what? They'd put down family roots, and they had the right to stay because of that. We have to actually get this process moving quicker, as they do in Holland, where you get processed immediately. Now, the real problem here is this is not the ECHR. This is not European law. This is British judges using British law to gum up the damn system, and it simply isn't good enough. However, we are deporting more people now than has happened, and admittedly the numbers have gone up.
But not small boat people. These are people who are prepared to go home.
Yeah. Well, no. Then a lot of them. Don't forget, we're seeing these raids that are taking place at the moment. But fortunately, the French are finally getting their boots wet. They're actually wading out into La Manche and actually turning some of these boats back, and not before time.
But they're not doing what the Belgians have been doing for a long time, and the Belgians do a much better job on this because they've taken tough action. They arrest these people. They make it very clear the boat isn't going to be sailing because it's dangerous. And the French just wave them off.
Because you can actually use maritime law. You can actually say that this is not a seaworthy vessel.
Well, it isn't. It's quite obviously it isn't. These are illegal boat journeys, and they won't arrest them. And these people doing it, they're money laundering, they're tax fiddling, they're risking people's lives at sea, and the French and sometimes the British authorities don't bother to arrest any of them.
But if anybody thinks that you can actually send a Type 23 or Type 44 destroyer or a frigate out there, the minute a British Royal Navy vessel would intercept one of these boats, the swine in the boat would actually get a knife and stick it in the RIB, deflate it, the bodies would be floating around in the sea, and we would have absolutely no option. There's no way anybody in this country could stand by and watch somebody drown.
No, of course not. We don't
none of us want to do that.
That's what they would do. So talk about sending the Royal Navy and to stop the boats that way. But the only way we can actually deal with it, firstly, process.
You have to stop them in France as they do in Belgium.
We've got to kill the economic model at the moment. You see the money some of these people are making.
But Stephen, it's worse than that. The economic model is working.
It can't be much worse.
Because the economic model is working so well that the prices come down. And therefore it is, which tells you it's becoming easier to get people across. I think they're offering 50% off for Albanians over the summer because the Albanian numbers went down because Conservative policies helped reduce it, and now there's a special offer.
Markets work, and the Belgians, again, they took powers to take their mobile phones, all the passengers, and to see where they'd book the ticket and who they'd paid and all the rest of it. Why don't we do that?
Well, here's the thing, Jack. Look at Sweden. Sweden is, all my adult life, Sweden has been the bastion of liberty, freedom, and state socialism, and, all the good things in life. They have got the strongest, the toughest anti-illegal immigration laws anywhere in the world. They actually take people's wedding rings off them if they come to pay for their accommodation. And they also have a law there. You cannot actually all live in the same ghetto. If you have a concentration of people in one area, particularly in southern Sweden, they bulldoze it. Now, that is taking it almost too far. But I think the liberal sensibilities in this country have now been abused so much that people like myself on the left are simply saying, look, we have to do something, even if the squeamish British public are going to have to actually take some of this on the chin.
That was Rwanda, and Trump's done it with El Salvador. 91% reduction in illegal migration into the US from the Mexican border in April. It can be done.
It can be done, and that was done just by taking the necessary powers, and this government's got a majority to die for. It could get the powers through tomorrow if it wanted to.
But look,
so why doesn't it get on with it?
Leaving aside San Francisco for a minute, but look what's happening in Florida. In Florida, a Republican state, you've got Republicans there say, for heaven's sake, stop this, you're killing the agricultural economy.
All right, well, we're really lucky tonight. Sit on your seats, the edge of your seat, because the most exciting Department of State, the Home Office itself, has told GB News We inherited an asylum system under exceptional pressure, and we make no apologies for taking the necessary and immediate action to restore order, increasing asylum decisions, making and returning nearly 30,000 people with no right to be here. My goodness, that was a thrill. Thank you very much to my panel. Shortly, the government has announced it will cut net zero taxes on energy-intensive manufacturers. It's taking up my policy. Is this the beginning of a major Labour rollback on green policy? And what's Mr Miliband think?
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
For years now, those of us on the realist, pro-growth side of the argument have pushed for rolling back the green policies that make energy more expensive, because anyone with sense knows that the key to a strong economy is cheap energy. But after years of extolling the fancy virtues of net zero, His Majesty's government is now cutting net zero taxes on some energy-intensive manufacturers, including car makers, aircraft factories and chemical plants, as part of its new industrial strategy. Well, I'm very pleased now to be joined by the energy consultant, Catherine Porter. Catherine, thank you very much for coming in. Part of me thinks this is completely ridiculous, that you put surcharges onto bills to make energy more expensive, which are put on by the government, and then you give industry money to pay the surcharges. This is just a merry-go-round of taxpayers' money and fundamentally inefficient.
It is, and it undermines the original principle, which is that the polluter should pay. So if you take the most polluting industries and give them an exemption, then what's the point, really? They should recover these levies through taxation instead.
And that lower polluting people will still pay, lower energy users will still pay high charges for energy. So you maintain an inefficiency within the economy.
You do, and in terms of households, the poorest households have the least ability to impact their consumption, except in really crude ways. Often people on low incomes rent, so they can't really improve their insulation, they can't get more efficient appliances, and they can't afford things like solar panels and electric cars. So they're unable to move away from their consumption unless they make very broad choices between heating and eating, which is clearly undesirable.
And I know your great concern is energy security. How do we make certain that the supply meets the demand in the depths of winter in 5 years' time?
Well, I think we're already putting that at risk. We've got large parts of our nuclear fleet due to retire by 2030. We've got potentially a tenth of our gas fleet retiring over the same period. And with 8-year lead times to buy new gas turbines, and that's for the delivery of the equipment, that's nothing to do with planning, it's difficult to see how we can maintain that energy security.
Because during this winter, we got one day when they were putting out an alert warning that they may run short of electricity, and the answer to that is rolling blackouts.
Yes, and we came very close on the 8th of January. It was a combination of poor forecasting because the tools that the system operator uses are pretty old and out of date. And in fact, they're doing an audit of their demand forecasting and admitted it hadn't been looked at in between 10 and 20 years, which I think is dropping the ball quite significantly. We had quite a lot of outages on the import cables to Europe at that time, and some bad decision-making within the control room meant they actually brought off gas power stations just before the peak of demand, and really left themselves quite vulnerable.
And the advantage of gas power stations is that they can go from being switched off to producing electricity faster than any other form of generation?
Well, pumped hydro is faster.
Okay.
We actually have the largest pumped hydro plant in Europe, in North Wales, and that can go from 0 to full load in 16 seconds, which is extremely impressive, and can run then for 5 hours. And normally what you expect in a shortage is that you have batteries that will respond in sub-second intervals to help stabilise the grid. Then you bring on the pumped storage, and that gives you enough time to fire up the gas. A warm gas turbine will start up in about 25 minutes, but it's longer if it's cold.
And that's where the forecasting is so important. But you have some idea of what's happening with the wind and the sun in winter, and the patterns of demand weekdays are fairly consistent Monday to Friday?
Yes, during the week you have similar demand and then much lower at the weekend. The problem is that the system operator has poor tools both for forecasting demand and for forecasting the weather. And if we look back to the 29th of May, we had high wind expected, but on the day it was less than the forecast suggested. And strangely, the within-day forecast was less accurate than the day-ahead forecast. And this had stimulated a lot of exports to be booked, but they couldn't be delivered because of grid constraints. So the system operator ended up making something like 25,000 instructions within what we call the balancing mechanism that day, using software that dates back to the 1980s. And this is software which not infrequently has to be taken out for maintenance or just simply breaks down, and in which case they have to revert to telephone instructions. Now, 25,000 instructions is 17 a minute. It's not feasible to do that by the telephone.
So this proposal from the government is a really piddling step in the overall context, that we need a fundamentally new energy strategy that ensures security of supply and modern means of delivery.
It is, and they're really aiming for the wrong thing as well. They're talking a lot about levelling the playing field with Europe, ignoring the fact that European manufacturers also aren't competitive on a global scale. You've seen a lot of manufacturing in Germany, for example, relocating to China. And so just being on a level playing field with Europe isn't going to cut it.
Oh, Catherine, thank you very much indeed. We're going to be getting to Patrick in a moment. No, we're not, because Patrick isn't ready, so we've got more time, which is excellent. So, competing with Europe, they're obsessed by Europe. We need to be competing with at least the United States, which is a quarter of our price, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. The United States it has a very strongly gas-based electricity system, but because they produce that gas themselves, it's extremely cheap.
All right, thank you very much. Well, Patrick is now up to the wicket and ready to receive the bowling. Patrick, where are you going to be hitting the ball this evening?
Well, I'm having a look at the fact that a lot of the Ayatollah's useful idiots are already here on the streets of Britain, and we appear to be doing precious little about it, so I'm going to be talking about all of that. We also have a huge update for you. We reported human trafficking gangs to the National Crime Agency. We reported several of them to them about 2 weeks ago. We thought we'd check in today to see if they are still operating, and it turns out, shock horror, as far as we can tell, all of them appear to still be operating, which begs the question, doesn't it, what on earth are they playing at? We'll have any breaking news for you from the Middle East and domestically as well. All of that 9 to 11 p.m. right here on GB News. But of course, we've got to show you weather, haven't we?
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. For many, it's fine out there this evening, but we are going to see some wet weather working its way in, bringing a wet start for many tomorrow. A more humid feel tomorrow. It's been quite fresh today with a brisk westerly wind. And these weather fronts are now approaching, bringing cloud and rain across Northern Ireland through the evening. Nothing too heavy at this stage, but could see some heavy pulses developing later in the night across Northern Ireland and then across parts of northwest England and North Wales, along with much of southern Scotland. It turns soggy through the early hours. Further east and further south, most areas staying dry. Reasonably warm night. Temperatures mostly holding up in the teens. On to Tuesday, and as I said, a bit of a wet start for some, particularly northwest England, North Wales, southwest Scotland. Some of that rain at times getting to the east of the Pennines. Much of East Anglia in the southeast starting dry. May well start off with a bit of sunshine here, but quite grey for South Wales, southwest England. There's that zone of wet weather over Northern Ireland, northwest England and southern Scotland. Some breaks in the cloud a little further north, but again here we'll see further showers coming in at times across the far northwest. So as I said, it is a bit of a messy picture. The rain across northern England's likely to last on and off through much of the morning. Same goes for North Wales. Some of it getting to the east of the Pennines, but a decent chance that areas here will stay dry. Not much rain at all getting to East Anglia, the Midlands, and here actually better chance of seeing some breaks in the cloud come the afternoon. That will lift the temperatures. Quite warm if the sun pops out, 25, maybe 26 or a degree or so higher. And quite a humid feel for England and Wales. Again, a bit fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Wednesday's a largely dry day. Maybe this cloudier zone over the Midlands and South Wales generating a little bit of rain. And late in the day, we could see some thunderstorms drifting up from France across eastern England. So that is something we need to watch as the heat and humidity start to build again, with temperatures perhaps here on Wednesday getting into the high 20s. Bye for now.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters. Real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christie's Tonight. Iran fires at US bases in the Middle East, but...
It's a simple one, Minister. Are we for or against the American activity on the weekend?
Pathetic Labour ministers can't say which side they're on. Meanwhile, vile pro-Palestine idiots take to the streets of London, people praising the Ayatollah and dressed as concentration camp victims. In other news... I have a huge exclusive update for you on the Channel migrant gangs we reported to the National Crime Agency. Plus...
Today is a day of celebrating the Windrush generation, the first nurses, the first midwives in our NHS.
All right, come on, but do me a favour, because the Windrush generation didn't